Welcome to Mokena's Front Porch, a Mokena history podcast with Matt Galick and me, Israel Smith. This is a conversation I was really looking forward to having, and it turned out to be as good as I expected, I think. I really enjoyed talking with the Bergmans. Matt was not able to join us, but our friend Tony Margis came and sat with me, and Tony and Dave know each other, I think mostly from hanging out at Little Al's, but so they know each other, and so it was nice that Tony was able to come and join us. He shared some historical things as well and information that he has. So that was nice to see him. We also, as we've been doing this summer, we recorded this episode sitting on my front porch. So you'll get to enjoy the sounds of downtown Mokena, like the train, cars, and my neighbor's kids playing. It was a beautiful summer night. So I couldn't pass up the opportunity to sit out on the porch and have the conversation with the Bergmans. The other night, Matt and I sat down to record, and we talked a little bit first about the Bergmans, and I wanted to get his perspective on why he believed they were important and their historical role to our village, so that we can kind of understand going into this, the background. And, Dave spent his whole life working on Front Street and living on Front Street. He has a great sense of humor. He has his stories are really interesting. I'm hoping we get a chance to talk more. Although he told me he ran out of stories, but I don't think I believe him. Before we get into the conversation, you'll hear Matt and I talk a little bit about the Bergmans, and then once we get into the recording, as I've had happen a couple times here and there was a small glitch, and I did a brief introduction that was cut off, and as we're talking, we are beginning with Mr. Bergman talking about when his father passed away. And so that's where that story starts, but you didn't miss anything before that, but there's nothing I could do about it. So other than an introduction of Tony and the Bergmans and thanking them for sitting down and talking with me, which, again, I will just say to them, thank you. They were very nice to come over here. We had a really nice conversation, and I'm glad we finally got to really meet and talk, and I'm sure we're going to have more opportunities to talk in the future. So, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with the Bergmans. Matt, on this episode, we're going to talk to Dave and Charlene Bergman.
Yeah.
And you weren't able to join us for this conversation, but it's a really good conversation. They're super interesting people.
Yeah, they definitely are.
Great senses of humor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And here we have a lot of laughs, a good time. So tell us, what you know about the Bergmans and why they're important to Mokena.
Yeah, so it's a very important family to the history of this town for a lot of reasons. They've lived here for many, many, many years. Not many people can say that they've been around in Mokena quite as long as the Bergmans have. Dave moved to town, and of course I don't remember the exact year right off the top of my head, but it was right after the end of World War II. So this is right after 1945, maybe around 46 or so. I'm sure he says exactly when, but it was right in that immediate post-war era when everybody was coming back to town that had been off fighting, and the town started to experience a lot of growth that it hadn't had in quite a long time. And Dave continues, I won't say where he lives, and I'm sure has some privacy, but he has been living in the same house on Front Street that he always has since he first moved here as a pretty small kid. He was once again, I'm sure he says in the interview how old he is, but I won't release it. I know exactly how old he is, but he was, let's see, he had to be less than 10 when he moved here. And Charlene, his wife, has also, Mrs. Bergman, has roots planted in the community that go way, way far back. Her ancestors were the Hohenstein family, who came to Mokena, or not, let's say Frankfort Township. They came to Frankfort Township as the area where they settled and farmed. Nowadays would be considered Mokena, but at that time it wasn't. It was too far outside town. The old farmstead having been located on 191st Street. And that was right after the Civil War.
We're at about on 191st Street.
Let's see. So the Hohenstein farm that Simon Hohenstein Sr. farmed, and which later passed into the hands of his son, Christian, that stood, let's see, on the north side of the road, a little bit a little bit east of, I guess that's 88th Avenue. If you were to go just a little bit further east from there, let's see, on the other side of the road, there is I guess it's like a storage facility. Kind of directly across from there is where, on the north side of the road, is where the Hohenstein farm was. And in fact, pretty recently, up to about maybe 7 or 8 years ago, there was still one of the silos still standing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Got some pictures of that, luckily, before it came down.
And that would have been, that definitely would have been out in the country from downtown Mokena at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was would have been considered pretty far outside town. But yeah, that was in the hands of the Hohenstein family for many years, decades and decades. And that's Charlene Bergman's family. So
yeah, wow.
She can call herself a real Mokenian, that's for sure.
And for sure, you talk, and we hear Dave, was part of the fire department for a long time.
He was,
And, another person, a business person in town that was part of, the civic side and the helping the community, whether it be with, with the police officers or that. They're all community members. These Front Street business owners were.
Yeah.
And that's something that, the Bergmans carried through all those years.
Oh, sure they did. Yeah, their business, Dave's Auto, right on Front Street, which for those of us who don't remember the business, that was in the same old building where Tribe's Brewery was all the way up until recently. Yeah, that was a real landmark in Mokena. They set up shop there in the 1970s and were in business all the way up until... Trying to place it. You must have been around, and they probably, once again, I'm sure they say in the interview, I'm just kind of guessing, around 2015 or so. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was a long established business in town. And Dave, before he branched off on his own with his own business, worked for the Cooper and Hastert Ford agency, which we have talked about in the podcast.
And he talks a lot about that and his experience and how much that shaped and helped him with his business. Really neat the way he's tied to so much history. I mean, then when you think of the Cooper Hastert, in the years they go back, it's really incredible.
It is, yeah.
And then today still have his daughter has the U-Haul and the Star Spangled Sails, which he talks a lot about how he got into doing that and sourcing American-made flags.
Good, yeah.
So it was a really well-rounded conversation. I always appreciate to get your input as well and kind of share with us why it's important that we're talking to these guys and get their stories and hear their history as well. So. Thanks for your input, Matt, and I hope you enjoy the conversation as well.
I know I will. Always love hearing both of them talk whenever I can.
In 46 at an auction down in Joliet.
And where was the house at?
It's the one I live in on Front Street.
On Front Street. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And in 1947, he died. He was there the one winter. And then came summer, and it was like August. We were down at the tavern on the corner of Mokena, or Wolf, and LaPorte. And they played baseball there in the evening. And I was there, and I think the ball game was over with around 10 o'clock. And I walked home, and there was all kinds of people there. My dad had had a heart attack.
And how old are you when that happened?
10.
10 years old. So what happened after that? You stayed in town? It was just,
No,
do you have siblings? Or?
I got forced into moving in with my aunt and uncle, which was my dad's brother and his wife, in Chicago, on the south side by the railroad, by the Rainbow Beach, 76th Street and Exchange Avenue.
Okay.
And from that point, why don't you feed them flies while we were here?
I know Rainbow Beach.
You got a fly bug in you, huh?
Yeah. And I stayed there for 3 years maybe. Then I came back out here and I rented a room from Bessie Newton at right behind the village hall.
Okay.
On the corner there. Earl Baker lives in it now. And $1 a day for the room, and she did your clothes for $1 extra.
And did you have a job then that paid?
Yeah, I worked for the Ford people. One day I was messing around, and he said, "What are you doing today?" I said, "I'm going to go swimming." We had a pond down there behind the park, still there. And we called it Sapex. Whether that was a guy's name or not, I have no idea. But it was an 18-foot spring-fed pool, or pond. And we went down there and swim every day or every couple of days. Come up through the woods. And there was a guy by the name of Dick McGovney.
Sure, that's a well-known town name here.
And he lived he had a house, and they moved the jail from Mokena down there. Now, I had never seen that jail up here in town, but they say they moved it down there. And he slept in that jailhouse. And we used to come up through there, a bunch of kids, and we stopped and get a drink out of the well. And somebody opened the well up, and there was rats floating in the top of the water.
Oh,
and
my
I
gosh.
said, "I don't think we'll drink this anymore." But nobody got sick. So
Wow. So
Harold told you to come to work.
yeah, I was out there, and I was going to go swimming. He said, "No, you go home and change clothes. I'm going to give you a job." Well, I didn't know if I wanted to work or not, but he insisted that I do that. So I went down. I came up there, and I stayed with him for 23 years.
wow.
And he became more like a father to me than I can remember my dad being.
And that was at the Ford
Ford
agency.
agency.
Correct. Okay.
It was called Cooper and Hostred Ford Agency, and they sold Ford tractors and equipment, and they sold cars. And
what did you start doing there when you first started working at the
he
dealership?
said, he handed me this bunch of stuff, and he said, "You go over there by the grinding wheel and you clean it off. You'll get all that carbon off of them. These are valves that come out of an engine." And I want all that off of there. And I had them shining when I got done. I maybe took a little longer, but I had them shining.
So you were with them for quite a few years.
23.
So what kind of jobs did you do while you were with them?
Oh, I did mechanical. First off, I worked a rack for a while. And then on Saturdays, we used to have a guy come from the railroad. He was a foreman for the Gandy dancers, or the track repairs. His name was Bill Viscori.
Gandy dancers?
Well,
Is
we
that what you
call them Gandy dancers, yeah.
Okay.
They were Mexicans that worked on the railroad.
Okay.
And Bill used to come over there in the evening. He'd work, mess around. He wasn't married, didn't have nothing to do. He lived on that lot that I have there where the U-Hauls are. There was a small cottage on that place. And he had a well. But he had an old wood stove for heat and a bed. And he finally got a girlfriend from Frankfort, and they used to go out every night and have supper or whatever, and he finally married her. But he was a good guy, good friend. he died of cancer. And then I got into giving them, people would say, how much is my car worth if I wanted to buy that? And I'd say something, just a price, I give you $700 for your car. And he come out there and he says, you're doing pretty good. He said, I'd like to have to sell a few. He said, so I started selling cars, but I stayed in the mechanical work too. I did
Did
both.
he have other salesmen as well?
No, him.
He was the main salesman.
Yeah, even his partner didn't sell cars. But
Barney
Hustert
didn't sell cars.
No, I can't remember if he might have sold one or two, but
What would he do mostly?
he just come around and raised a lot of hell. No, he was a good guy. He was a good boss. He'd chase parts.
Okay.
And he'd tell me, you go with me today for a little bit. We're going to Kankakee to get some tractor parts. Okay. You drive. No, I don't even think I had a driver's license yet. And he said, you drive. And I'm driving along, and we get down about Andrews. He says, don't this car go any faster? I don't know. I give it the gas. We got up to about 90 miles an hour, and he says, you're doing pretty good. Just keep going. But we used to call him Barney Oldfield. But he did that. And there was a lot of fun there. A lot of fun guys. Had a guy there by the name of Fred Clark. He cleaned cars, but he worked for Railway Express. And he was on a train, and he would haul these money bags and mail and stuff. And at that time, when a train went through, they had a holder that was a post, and they would put a gunny sack or a canvas bag hanging between the two posts. And the train would come on, and they never stopped. They just grab it and snatch it. And he'd slide the door open and pick it up. And
so that was something that went on in your day? You remember that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
As well?
Oh,
wow.
Yeah. He told me one time, he said, Dave, if you want, I'll give you this bag of coins that I will have in my car, in a railroad car. He said, if you can carry the block, I'll give it to you. It was full of change.
How far'd you get?
I never took it. Out.
Wow, that's really interesting. We've done an episode of the podcast on the Ford Agency. Matt and I did, and one of the things that it talked about is that it really was, for a lot of years, kind of a town center. People would gather there and socialize. And what do you remember about that? Like what?
We had a couple of seats out front, and if there was no work, we'd all sit out front. Had two gas pumps, standard oil pumps with the crown on the top.
Would you pump gas as well for people?
Oh, yeah. And we'd sit out there and kibitz, smoke cigarettes, and whatever. And then somebody would say, well, there's a guy in the back wants an oil change. Okay, then a couple of us go back there and change the oil. And it was kind of a haphazard deal at that time. And we had a lot of fun, though.
Eventually, so the Cooper Hostert Agency opened in 1916, and I had read somewhere you started about 1953 working for them.
I can tell you that they used Harold Cooper, who was my boss. He was the Cooper part of the business, his dad and him, because Barney and Elmer Cooper were brother-in-laws. And they used to farm out here on Route 6 and Wolf. Well, then they came into town and they opened up this garage. And they both worked it. And then Harold came in and took over. He was a big guy. And he used to tell me that he worked for Ford Motor Company up at 130th and Torrance. That was a plant. And they used to put the bodies of the cars in a boxcar. And Harold said, that was my job up there, was to put them bodies in the car. And he'd say, I'd call them up on the telephone and say, there's a carload of cars coming down. Don't move nothing. I'll take care of it when I get home. I know how to unload it. I'm the guy that loaded it. And they just let it sit there. He'd come in, there was a siding on this side of the tracks. Well, the depot was there also. And they would put that on the siding, and he'd go in there, and I wasn't with him when he did that. That was long before me. Them were Model Ts.
And were they still putting the cars together?
They put them together in the back shed. They had a back barn that faced Front Street. The back was at First Street. And they had a rail in the ceiling. Went around, was a U-shaped rail. And when they got the car in, they would push the chassis and the engine and the steering wheel were all together. And the wheels were on the car. They would push it, and then they would lower the body onto it off of this track.
Wow.
And then they'd bolt it up and do the wiring and the gas lines and all that kind of stuff, because the gas tank was already in it. And, I didn't never see this. They just told me about it. So, but.
Well, hopefully when this gets released to the WW Wide World Web podcast, the Heggwish Plant is the oldest Ford assembly plant in Chicago, 130th and Torrance.
Yeah.
So I have pictures from when it opened to pictures to every millionth car that was sold at that plant. So I'll make a copy for you guys too.
Any idea how many million? They marked every
I think
million.
they made about 7 million.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but I do recollect every time I would do the research and look it up, it would be X million cars, and there's pictures where they're standing on holding, like the Model Ts and all that. That's the oldest plant. So the one in Chicago Heights is just a stamping plant.
That's a stamping plant.
It's a stamping plant where they make the pieces for the car, but the assembly plant is 130th and
They had a plant in Livonia, Michigan, also
Torrance,
that
right.
made engines.
Yeah. So the one in 130th and Torrance, a lot of people connect it with Heggwish. So Heggwish is a little community of Chicago, but it's actually in South Deering. But it's never been associated with South Deering per the conversation of the neighborhood. So, but yeah, I'll get you some pictures of that.
Probably
cool.
sometime in the early 70s. I remember a guy telling me he was a friend of mine. He worked for Ford at the assembly plant. His father was my field rep for Ford Motor Company. His name was Cladis. Danny Cladis was my field rep. George Cladis worked in the factory. And he had brothers and sisters all over the place. Everybody got a job. But what I was going to tell you, that I don't remember right offhand now, but I'll get back to me. I'll get back to you about it.
As the Ford Cooper Hostert agency closed and was sold after you opened Dave's Auto in 1975.
But they had been there. He sold out to Ralph Show over in Frankfort. It was a Cooper Show agency.
And did that stayed here on Front Street for that time, or did they move?
He kept the one in Frankfort, Show.
Okay.
And his name was not S-H-O-W, it was S-J-O. And Cooper was his father-in-law, wasn't it? He married one of the Cooper girls.
From Oregon.
And they came here, and then he bought Cooper Hostert out. I was on vacation in Colorado, and I called up to see if everything was okay. And first thing he said is, we're having a terrible time. He said, I wish you were here, because the transmission on this guy's car, we've had it out 3 or 4 times, He said, we can't stop this noise that he makes. He said he steps on the gas and it goes, "Rrrt!" I said, well, it's got a broken motor mount. He said, what? Next day I called him again. He says, you're the smartest kid I ever met. He said, that was what was the matter with that car. They had the transmission out 4 different times and took it apart.
Did he pay you while you're on vacation for that?
I got paid anyway. But, the next time after Show bought the place, I stayed with him for a short time. And I didn't like the way he ran the business. He was kind of loose. And we took a vacation. Charlene and I went to Florida with our kids. And I come home in about a week, and they handed me a check. I thought, well, I'm out here. I said, what's this for? Well, he said, anybody that come in and ask for you, if we sell them a car, you get half the commission. I said, if I'd known that, I'd stayed in Florida.
So was there ever any thought or opportunity for you to buy the dealership or become a part of it? Or
there was a deal, or there was talk, not a deal, that Harold and I would be partners and I would buy out the Hustards. And the problem was Harold was going to come up with the money and I would sign on with him, But the Hustards thought it was worth more than what he was offering. So this Chuck Hustard, which was the oldest boy from the Hustard family, he said, Dave, come on down to my house for supper tonight. And I said to Harold, I said, Chuck Hustard just invited me to supper. He said, you go. But he said, I'm going to tell you something. When you go, if he says anything about that deal that we're trying to cook, he says, you just tell him if he don't like the price, we'll sell our half to him for the same price. He shut up from there on. He never.
Huh.
He worked for United Airlines. He was the head of the mechanics in the United Airlines, this Chuck Hustard.
Oh, wow.
He was a smart guy and a nice guy. But his mother and his brother Art, which worked for the company, and him were buying out his mother. And it just didn't work. Art was his brother. He had been there for a long time as a mechanic. And Chuck come in and he was going to start everything all over new. Now, I did pick up a few tips from him. And I think somebody else probably did. But they faded away. They just decided that they didn't want to own it. He didn't want to buy this guy out, and the other one didn't want to have the money to buy out. So that just kind of went away, went back to the mother. And I stayed there for a while, but they sold out the show. And I didn't last maybe a year, huh? And Charlene took care of their books, and she was a cashier and whatever, but he would come in and open the cash register and take whatever he wanted. Nobody made any arrangements of what he took.
So then in 1975, you decided to open up your own place.
I went down the street.
And
Walt Yonker owned the building that I had. It was used as a road. Frankfort Township had the road equipment in there for a time. Walt had a couple of Caterpillars and a trailer and a dump truck, and he used to haul coal for the grade school because they had a coal burning furnace in the basement. Mm-hmm. He'd have a big truck load of coal for him, and he didn't want to really use it for much. He had people in the neighborhood used to bring their cars in and park them overnight, you know. He'd give them a key, and they walk in, get their car out, and that was fine. That didn't work out too well. Well, after I got a little upset with Ralph Scholl, my brother was in a concrete business, and he said, I got to have my truck fixed. Can you do that? And I said, I think so. I have to see if I can get that garage. So I went to Walt and I asked him if I could use the garage. I said, I'll pay you rent. It might take me a day or two. Yeah, he said, go ahead. So that's how I got started in there. And then he came we opened up and we're renting it from him. And then he came in one day and he says, I want to sell my place and I give you first refusal. You're here and I'd like to see you buy it. I said, okay, how much you want? And he told me, and okay, that's good for me. So
And you were already in business at that point.
I was kind of
already
in
established.
and out, you know.
Okay.
Harold and the banker, Les Brownlee, Johnson, they kept telling me, you don't want to leave, you don't want to leave. And I said, I don't want to stay. So I said, I'm leaving. And then it was ironic. It was probably 6 months or so. Harold come down. He said, do you think I could put a desk in here and we could sell a few cars together? I said, sure. What the hell? So he did.
Oh, wow.
And then people come in. They all knew him anyway. He'd get to see all his old friends. And
So did Dave's Auto kind of take over as the social pickup, the social hangout?
yeah. One of my favorite people that used to come in was Father Cecil Coop. Great guy. And he was a Catholic priest over here. And he come in there and talk and have fun with them. And he had us fix his buses, school buses. Well, we'd fix them late at night because we couldn't get them till 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So we'd
between
work
runs,
till
you had to
10
do 'em?
o'clock or so, you know. And when we got done, Harold say, we're going over to the Oasis in Frankfort and have a little lunch. I said, okay. He said, we're going to stop, take the bus over to Father's, and then we'll go to the door and knock on the door and tell him if we're going over to eat, and if he wants to come, he can come with us. Well, he was in his pajamas. Yeah, I'll be right there. So, and they moved him out of here, and he went to Springfield, I think it was. And he was down there for quite a while. And he used to come up once in a while. Now, you have to understand, this guy was a priest at Mokena, and he was sworn to poverty. But he had a Galaxy 500 XLT, a dog, and a pack of cigars. And he'd pull in the garage and he'd be smoking a cigar and the dog laying in the back seat, and nobody ever said nothing.
Was he a longtime priest here in town?
Yeah. He was a good friend. I invited him to our wedding, and my father-in-law said, who in the hell invited a priest? I said, I did. He's a friend of mine. You got all kinds of people here. I only got a few that I know.
Yeah, how many people complain about a priest coming to the wedding?
Well, them Protestants are that way.
Oh, that explains it.
That's what we are. We're Protestant.
Okay.
But he was a best friend. He liked Charlene. We had an old upright piano. Well, tell them about that, Mom.
Well, one of our customers' parents had passed away, and she was left with the family possessions, which one of them was an upright piano, and she didn't know what to do with it. And she didn't know how to move it. And so a couple of the guys moved it. We didn't know where to go with it, so it ended up out in the shop. Well, Father Coop would come into town. He loved to play the piano. And he would get out there. He had his chair, And he would sit down with the cigar in his mouth, his dog laying by him, and he would play and play, and everybody just come in and enjoy it. It was just
I don't know where he stayed
fun.
when he came up here.
I don't know either.
Was he playing church music in the?
Not really.
Played all kinds of stuff. But he when I get ready to leave and he might be there, and I'd say, I'm going to breakfast tomorrow morning. Meet me over here at the restaurant. Doc's. Okay. He'd be there. I'd buy him breakfast. And he was just a super guy. Now, I'll tell you something that probably you won't believe. He walked in the back door one day, and I had a mechanic laying underneath the car. And he was saying, where the hell is that son of a bitch? Where is that son of a bitch? And Father Coop walked up front, and he got a hold of Barney Hustard. Barney, I want to ask you a question. Yeah, he says, what part of a car is a son of a bitch? And Barney looked at him and he said, what are you talking about? Well, he said, it must be a car on a car because the guy underneath there is looking for it.
Wow, what a character. Any other characters that you remember from your days that were memorable?
Not really. We had a few characters, but
Tuffy Hummerding, Francis O'Brien.
yeah, Francis O'Brien, he was quite a guy. His wife was a postmistress, and
Meaning
he'd go around.
they delivered mail or ran
No,
the
they
post
just
office?
had a little post office there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And she and my mother got a job there. She was a civil service. She was filing bonds in Chicago at the Merchandise Mart, and she put in for this job as assistant postmistress, and she got it. So she worked there for a couple of years, I guess it was.
And was that when the post office was on Front Street?
Yeah, it was right where that, where that vacant lot is there between, the hearing aid place. Right next door to that, there was a small building. And there was a guy by the name of Andy Haar, and he was a barber. And he had a shop there. He was a barber, and in the back, he had a pool table. So kids would come in there and play pool and stuff and get a haircut. And that was...
That was where the post office was, on the corner of Front and Mokena Street, where the hearing aid place was and just moved out.
That's the first post office I knew of.
And then they moved down to the building down the street, west.
Okay. And that was built as a post office,
Yes.
is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I don't know that it was built. It was there when we come, but it must have been a rental place. Because when they went to build the post office, they built it down there where that, next to the driveway for the bank, that
Right, the Nas
by
building.
my building,
Yeah.
by
sure.
Dave's Auto. And then there was a building that was savings and loan. Then there was an alleyway, and then the next building, they built that for a post office. And later on in years, it became a printery. Guy did printing, business cards and all that kind of stuff. But
Well, I know we've let Mr. Bergman speak a lot. Maybe, Charlene, let's talk about you a little bit. When did you come to Mokena?
I came in the day we got married in 1961. But I lived over in Tinley Park.
Oh, okay.
On 171st and 88th by Andrews High School. I was a farm girl.
That was farm country then, huh?
Everything over there was farm country. My grandparents had a farm on the south side, and we had a farm set of buildings on the north side of the corner of 171st and 88th. But my mother was born and raised here in Mokena.
Really?
She's from the Hohenstein family.
Okay.
They lived out on 191st Street. Remember that last little silo that sat out there on 191st before you got to the industrial
I'm gonna
park?
get something out of my car.
It sat on the north side. That was their farm area.
Okay.
She was raised there with her 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and she lived here all of her life until she got married and married my dad, and then moved over to Tinley Park.
Wow. And they stayed in Tinley Park all their lives.
All their married life until 1962, the year after we got married. Then they decided to move to Indiana, Rushville, Indiana. Mom and Dad would go into town, and we had hogs on the farm. And Mom and Dad would go into town and come back home, and here there'd be kids in the haymow and in the pig barn, and that didn't set well with my dad. You don't do that. We knew well enough not to do it, and the town kids better learn how not to do it. So they decided to move and
Thank you.
moved down there onto another farm and lived their life down there then.
Wow. So what was growing up there like? What was school like for you?
We went to a one-room country grade school at 175th and Route 45.
Oh, wow.
And there were 13 kids in school.
How many grades?
We had all 8 grades. They were available, but we didn't have kids in all 8 grades. As there happened to be when I was in 8th grade, 5 of us were in the 8th grade. So that only left 8 kids for the other grades. Some didn't have any, some only had 1, some had 2. But
Wow.
it was...
So then, what high school did you go to then?
I started at Orland Park High School, and then my sophomore year, Carl Sandburg was built.
Oh, wow.
And we finished at Carl Sandburg.
So that school over there is really old.
But on both.
You were there before me.
That's Father Coop.
Oh, wow. Father Cecil Cooper, during his early years at the pulpit of St. Mary's original Little White Church. So he was a priest when it was at the old white church there. Wow.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't in that. It wasn't in that white church.
That he started there, and then they built.
Oh, I didn't remember him coming and doing that in there. You got the picture of the people in front of the Ford Garage?
It's in here.
And I'll show you what I've got too there are a couple pictures I found.
Yep.
Oh, here.
That's 1956. I remember that car sitting out front. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's a neat picture.
Yeah, we've got that one at home somewhere.
You know, and that's Barney Hustard out front.
All right,
Those
this
were
is
all the
great.
guys that
You've
were-
got them all written on here.
Yeah.
So this is in front of where?
Cooper Hustard.
In front of
right
Cooper
here,
Hustard.
right in front of this
That's
building.
there. Okay, and then written on the back you have from left to right are Fred Clark.
Fred Clark, and
A question mark on
That
the
one
second
there?
one.
that was Barney Hustard's son-in-law.
Okay.
And it was
I never knew what his name was.
I can't think
And then
of it
Barney's
now.
next to him.
And then Barney Hustard, and then Irv House, and the big tall guy in the back was Art Hustard, and the 2 boys there, the one with glasses sitting on the bike is Tony Dinah, the barber, and the other guy is Joey Gabarsik, and his father owned the Royal Blue Store.
Which was on the west side.
The Lashology building, Chase, that's up
Yes.
there now, right?
Yeah.
So, do you know when this picture was taken? Any idea around the year?
Vernon Haig is the other one that's sitting there. That's
Oh, okay.
Fred Clark, Vernon Haig, Barney Hustard. Now that's Barney's son-in-law. He married one of Barney's daughters.
Well, Tony looks like he might be just in grade school. I don't think he's in high school at that
Yeah, it
point.
looks pretty young here.
So,
See that?
Tony...
Yeah, I have an article at home from Tony
Yeah, we had the Standard
going
Oil
into
pumps,
the military,
Oh,
and that's Barney Hustard out there pumping gas.
so you could probably backdate that.
I think Tony is about 83 right now, if I'm not mistaken.
talking about?
age. Young
You're
Tony.
talking about Tony Jr.?
Yes. that's
Okay,
young.
so Tony Jr. went into the Marine Corps in 1959. I have the article at home.
So he would have had to be 21.
Now that building there, what is that building is there, that burnt down. That was an old barn. They used to have oyster suppers down in the basement. I didn't go to them. Harold told me about them. But the funny part of it was, this was two big doors that folded together, this way. And I got called out one night by the police. Maybe we think somebody's in the garage. Oh, can you get up here and open it up? I said, yeah. But when I got there, I said, it's already open. The door's open here. Well, is there a light in there? And I said, yeah. Well, can you go in? I said, hell no, you got the gun, you go in. This side door was against Tony Dinah. There was a building there next to Tony Dinah.
A house.
And that we used to go in, and that's where our rack was. We could drive in and go on a rack. In the wintertime, they had an old coal stove in the corner. And I called it Puff the Magic Dragon. That darn thing, every time we light a fire, the damn thing in the morning you come and the place was all smoke, ice cold. The ice was about 3 feet inside the door. And this guy wrote an article on this. He's still in the area.
Bob Baker.
Bob Baker. And if you'd like to read that article, I'm sure it's pretty nice. He did a tremendous job, but he got in trouble with the village. And they
No, these are.
more or less blackballed him.
Wow, this could be like a 14-hour interview. This is great. I know my voice is not in there.
These have nothing to do with the Ford garage, but that's when I went into my own business.
So this is from when you started the.
The one down in
Dave's
Bolton.
Auto?
Yeah.
So it's talking about. So it looks like this is from February of 1998 in the Lincoln Way Sun.
Yeah, it's not too antiquish, but I just thought, well,
That's
I'll take it
great,
along
yeah.
and see if you might be interested in looking at it. Doesn't mean nothing. What else have we got in here, Mom?
Do you remember when they brought new cars into town?
Oh yeah. When they brought in a new car, we would take and hide it in somebody's garage. And then we'd wait till a Friday night, Friday afternoon, and then that's when we start showing the car. And we only had a one-car showroom. And it had a little basement underneath the showroom. We were afraid it was going to collapse, But
So you put it in
fortunately,
somebody's garage in their home,
Yeah.
and then you'd bring it out for the
But
unveiling.
it would be all covered up.
Ah.
With
I never forget the time we got the
Blankets.
Pinto. And Louis Rauch owned the oil gas station over here, across the street from where I live on the south side of the track at Schoolhouse Road. That building was an oil company,
Mokena oil.
Phillips 66 products. Earlier in life, and I don't never remember, it wasn't there when I was there. That was the stockyards in Mokena. They used to pull the cattle in or the pigs in, and then they'd water them there.
So are you
Keep
talking about
moving.
where the apartment buildings are now?
No,
On the other side,
south
right
side.
behind you.
The
On the
building's
other side
there
of the
yet.
tracks. Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
But then tell them about what Myrtle would do with all the donuts. She would go to Elmer. Elmer was a baker in Frankfort. And every time there was a car opening, he would deliver the most wonderful donuts, a variety of donuts. He'd just bring them in by the boxes. And everybody that came in got a donut, cup of coffee, whatever, for the grand opening. That was and everybody made sure they got their donut, and they were to die for.
Wow. So tell me a little bit about how did you two end up meeting?
At a friend's wedding.
Oh, what?
How you met?
Oh,
He probably doesn't remember
I
because
think I was drunk. No, I
he'd been
wasn't.
tipping a few
It happens.
at a friend's wedding.
So you met at a wedding, and then tell us how did Dave and Charlene come about?
I asked her for a date. She said, yeah. So I got over there and I picked her up, and then a couple weeks later or something, some conversation we had, and I said something about, boy, you're lucky I showed up. She says, you're lucky you showed up because I had another guy coming.
Wow, and how many years have you been married now?
63.
Wow.
62.
62.
62.
Got married in 61.
So what was the wedding like? Were you married in Mokena, or you were?
We got married in Tinley Park at her church.
The Methodist Church in Tinley Park. And everybody had their reception at Sanger Hall in Tinley Park.
It burned down after
It was
that.
July 1st.
After your reception, it burnt down. Must have been quite the party.
It was. It was. Everybody was there. I mean,
We had a ball.
the
They
church
told
was,
me to go on home, go on home. I said, hell, I'm having too much fun.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
And then tell me about your family now. What kids you have? Grandkids?
we have daughter Linda, who just lost her husband 2 years ago to cancer. She lives here in town. We have a daughter Barbara, who runs the U-Haul. She's our second daughter. And then we have a third daughter, Margaret, and she lives in Manhattan. Barb has 4 daughters. Meg has 2 daughters.
Linda
And
has none.
Barb's second daughter has a daughter, which is a great-granddaughter. The next daughter has another daughter. So we have girls. Wouldn't you believe it, for a mechanic to have a room full of girls?
What are you going to do?
That's what everybody said. We just had our first great-grandson.
Oh,
So,
congratulations.
in January, so he's kind of the little prince right now.
And I've gotten to know Linda a little bit through the Heartland Service Dogs she did, and
Yeah, that's
through the
fun,
Mokena
yeah.
Lions Club and that. And then,
Right.
actually, so we just celebrated 7 years in Mokena, and I always say, we walked into what's now Tribes and rented our U-Haul truck, and so it's neat to see that the story, not knowing then the long story that was behind that
Barb
building.
started up there running U-Haul when we were up there.
Yeah, but I started it.
Dave and Linda started the U-Haul, and then Linda wanted to do other things, so she went off, and Barb came in and took over, and they run it as Star Spangled Sails. We sell flags.
Yeah, and I read an article about that in 2000. You guys started the Star Spangled Sails business.
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about that, like how that came about and what was involved with that business?
Do you want to tell them
What's that?
about Star Spangled Sails and why you
Oh.
started it?
That happened on 9/11. I said, we got to do something. So I said, let's go buy some flags if we can. And I took $100 or $200 and I went out trying to find flags. I bought them, I got them home, they were sold. I went out again. I took $500. Went out and I spent the $500. I was all over, and sold them. So I was sitting in my office one day and I said, I think I'm just going to start a business called, but I got to get a name for it. And then I thought, well, Star Spangled Sail would be a good name. She said, well, if that's what you want.
Well, U-Haul cannot be a business by itself.
Right.
It has to be mothered in under an existing business.
Okay.
And as long as we were there with Dave's Auto, it was under Dave's Auto. But when there was talk of us retiring, she decided to move on down where she's at now. So then she picked up the Star Spangled end of it, and that's the mother business, and U-Haul is the secondary business.
I still own that lot. That's why it's gravel, because I don't fall under their blacktopping deal. And they love to get the hell out of there and make me blacktop it. But before I do that, I'll sell it.
So the village, you're saying the village would like you to blacktop it?
Well, they would force, if somebody bought that, they would force them to blacktop it if that's what they're going to use it for parking.
But
Not because
you've
it's,
had it
yeah,
so
but
long.
if you're going to build a building on it, they wouldn't make them do that. You
So
know.
it's grandfathered in your name,
Right,
right?
right,
And Barb can.
right.
But
Use this if you're going to talk.
So it's grandfathered in your name, and then Barb can't take
Barb
that
rents it
property.
from me.
She rents it from you. Okay.
Right.
I don't know how much. It must have been pretty cheap.
And so I think we have, one of the flags of the telescoping flagpoles
Oh,
here
yeah, probably.
from the previous family that lived here, and
We were at a show up at McCormick Place, and this guy was selling flagpoles. And I said, "Is there a chance somebody become a dealer for you?" Yeah, you do whatever you want. You just can't come up here and sell. Oh, that's fine. I got a little town I'm in. Yeah, he said, go ahead. So we've been buying since the 9/11.
Yeah.
Right after that, we started doing business with him. And I bought one, and my son-in-law, Barbara's husband, is a Mexican. And I had a lot of deep thoughts about all that. And then turned out that it was okay. And he went and he got himself a citizenship. And I said, to celebrate what you got, I'm going to give you a flagpole and a flag. Well, he said, that'd be fine. So we put it in. He says, can I put a Mexican flag on there? I said, hell no.
Barb was really nice when I bought my house in 2009 here in Mokena. I'm on Stonehenge Drive. Her husband and her came out and they installed my flagpole.
Right.
And to this day, I still have my U.S. flag and my Marine Corps flag flying.
Good.
And she's very nice with everything she does at the shop. It's just not U-Hauls.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand the local businesses in town.
Right.
It's more than just the business.
Well, that's what it used to be, and that's what we would like to think it should still be, but Mokena is growing and growing away from that family business here. And, I used to stay at home when the kids were little, and I needed a pot roast. So I called Roy Richardson, Mokena Meat Market. Can you get a pot roast? He knew what I wanted. He'd have it ready. I'd send the kids up with the money. They'd get it. He'd package it, and they'd bring it on home again. Same thing up at the Royal Blue. I need a couple loaves of bread, or I need a gallon of milk. Send the kids up, and and it worked that way. But it doesn't.
That was in a building that
It's
is now
gone.
a dentist. That was a meat market when it first built it.
So I found an article, and based on what you said, Mrs. Bergman, I thought it was interesting. There was a 2006 Southtown Star article about Front Street, and you guys were featured in it. There's a great picture of you, Mr. Bergman. And Tony Dima on there talked about the days when farmers would come to town and do all their shopping on Front Street with grocery stores, taverns, butcher shops, 2 car dealerships, a boarding house, sweet shop, post office, and hardware store within a few blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So, that had to be a totally different town, a totally different
Oh, yeah.
time.
At the corner of Division, that on this side of that, in other words, facing Front Street on the west side of Division, that's where that hardware store
Dunham's
was,
hardware store.
called Dunham's.
Oh, there.
And he used to go in there. He had all kinds of stuff. I don't think he knew what the heck he had. And he'd say, I'm looking for the, I just sold the last one. That was his famous words.
It'll be in tomorrow or the next week, all the time.
Just sold the last one.
Mr. Dunham was quite a character.
So how much do you think that not having that changed kind of the sense of community?
Well, they killed Front Street. Front Street will never be back to what it was. There'll never be businesses on it, I don't think. I'm about the last one. I don't know what the guy that bought the old Clover Farm store. That's next door to my building on the east side.
Yeah.
He's in there rehabbing it. I think he's making apartments for people to live in and catch a train right across the street. Don't have any motor vehicle or anything like that unless they want one. But
Yeah, and his plan is to put a restaurant in the bottom as well. But
we had a nice
know.
restaurant in there.
Mm-hmm.
What was it called?
Sure. Paulie's.
Huh?
Paulie's.
Yeah, Paulie's.
I think that was the last thing that was in there, right?
I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
But before that, it was a Clover Farm store, grocery store. That's like Royal Blue. He was Clover Farm. That was owned by the Teskys.
Wanamaker's.
And Wanamaker first, and then the Teskys bought it, or that because they were relatives of the Wanamakers.
Was
And,
it an IGA or was it a regular just
it
mom and
was-
pop?
Mom and Pop.
Mom and pop. Okay.
They lived upstairs, and same thing with the Royal Blue. They lived upstairs, and
But see, Clover Farm was a name. It was like Whole Milk or whoever, Cheerios. That was a name. Same like Royal Blue was a name. That was a franchise as far as I know. You must have had to pay for that name. I don't know. I don't know that for a fact, but Royal Blue was all over the place at one time.
So, why do you think that downtown changed? Why do you think businesses went away? And
Well, I think
Any
a
ideas?
lot of it was because of they wanted to, they tried to streetscape it and it didn't work out. They changed the parking. We used to have parking on both sides of the street. Now they got it on one side, and it's angle parking. And it really hurt the town because if you have a couple like us now in our 60s or 80s, I stumble a lot. And if I have to walk across the street, there's no handicapped accessibility. You have to go to the opening at the parking lot and cross where that
by the
well,
old
you-
pharmacy,
you
you could
used
go
to-
in where that alley
yeah, it
is.
used to be the
Or by in front of our place, you could come up.
right.
in
But
our
you had to cross
location.
at the street where there was already a cut in, either a driveway or something, so you could get up on the sidewalk on this side. If you go down that street from Mokena Street to where the old drugstore was, you can't cross that street with any kind of public access. You have to step off the curb and go, and hope you make it.
so, is there a time frame? Do you think when it really you saw kind of a shift? And because interesting enough, in that same 2006 article, I think they quoted you, Ms. Bergman, as saying Front Street was once a vibrant venue, then it died. But in 2006, you said you thought you saw it picking up again. Was that
Well,
just
it died pretty completely when they did the street. They did the street from Wolf Road all the way to Schoolhouse, and they had it torn up. You couldn't come in at all through the front door. We had access from First Street. We were fine in that respect. And I'm saying it picked up in 2006 because we had a steady set of customers. But new people coming in town, once they had the street back, you could only go west on it, and try to turn into Park. they had taken the parking on the north side of the street away. And the parking was only at an angle, and it came from the west. So you had to come from the east and turn and try to make it into one of those parking spots. The old people couldn't do that. They were not used to that. That was not their way of operating in Mokena. So they gave up. They moved. They went other places, and once you lost the post office, everybody came to the post office on Saturday morning. Everybody came to Mokena State Bank on Saturday morning. Everybody came to the drugstore on Saturday morning. You couldn't find a parking space on Front Street on Saturday morning. You go down Front Street now, and you could shoot up, I don't know what, and not hit a thing.
Why do you know why or what the justification was for moving the post office to Wolf instead of off of Front Street?
It wasn't big enough. It wasn't accessible enough, evidently. It didn't have enough parking. It only had parking on the side of the building.
Sure.
And things were moving on. The gas station, which was on the corner where Patterson's dental office, that was gone. So that area had changed. They had to have parking, although they don't have street parking up there. They had to have their own parking lot. Newer people came in, not that newer people are bad, but newer people came in with different ideas and just changed the town. And it doesn't really sit well with us. We still grumble and, it's not the Mokena we knew, but we have to realize that things have to change, have to move on, but we just lost a lot. We lost a lot.
I don't know.
When we took the carnival off the street, we used to have a carnival on Front Street. You couldn't move on Front Street when the carnival was here. And, we can't have a carnival down there. It's too, da-da-da-da-da. We'll move it out to the 191st Street out there. They moved it out there. And the parents said, I'm not going to take my kids out there because I could let them run uptown here. They could go uptown here all by themselves, and I didn't have to worry about it. Now I can't leave them out there. I have to stay with them. What am I going to do when they are on the rides?
Everything grew up, and we stayed behind, I guess, because the fire department come along and they said, go ahead. Fire department came along and they said, you can't put the Ferris wheel in front of this house, in front of the Royal Blue store, because we can't access it if it started on fire. Okay. You can't put it here because you'll have a fire there too. That's an old building.
Did you guys ever have block parties where they would just close the street down and you
street dances?
We had
street dance? You could just
Oh,
come
yeah.
out and sit out and block the whole street and
Right.
We had a rock and roll band on one end sitting on a semi-trailer thing, and on the other end was a country and western. And then half the night they'd switch, and the crowd would switch with them. Well, we had a
That
ball.
was fun. But,
That was a good time.
we don't have Tuttle's anymore, which was dry goods. They had everything. They sold TVs. They sold pins and needles. They sold buttons. They sold birthday cards. They sold everything. We don't have that anymore. We've got all of these dollar stores all around. And it's just get in your car and go. Take the business out of town.
Yeah, you
And
can't
take
put
it.
everything in 4 blocks, That's the trouble.
Well, and you got to think the growth of Mokena with subdivisions moving
Yeah.
further and further out, downtown becomes less of a focus area. Clearly, they've put a lot of focus on the LaGrange, I-80 area there.
Well, Grange Road is not that prevalent of businesses. Everything, the back of their buildings face 45. If you come on the west side, they do have a few buildings that are there, but most of them are set back quite a ways. So when a guy goes by there 50, 60 miles an hour, he ain't looking for that kind of stuff. So they're going to kill that too. You know.
I don't know.
A little bit. I mean, I want to talk about, because Dave, you were part of the fire department
I was
for
on the fire
a
department.
long time. You talk.
I don't remember how many years. I was at the I was there when they had the 50th anniversary
Okay.
of the fire department.
And they just, so in 2017 had the 100th year anniversary, isn't that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you get to ride in the old fire truck when it was?
No, I
No.
didn't.
That was
No,
after you.
I did not. I got to fix the 46 Ford truck. It was a 1.5 ton F500 or F600, and I worked on that once in a while. But I never worked on the Model A, and they got a pull cart also there, where the hose is on it, and they run up to a hydrant and hook it up and then run down the road with it.
Any big fires or any big activity
Oh
you
yeah,
had?
the Ford garage that I was in burnt down.
That was while you were.
I was not there at that time. I was in my own, but it burned down. We remember we walked uptown. Fred Rao was a fire chief at that time.
There was a big house between Tony Dinah's home place and the garage. A big home. 2 older ladies lived in it.
Yeah.
And it was in the middle of summer, hotter than Hades, and it started burning. And it was right next to the garage. So and Dinah's place, which was wood, and the garage was wood. And everybody's concerned, you know, and then there's the gas pumps there.
Oh boy.
So everybody turned out for that. And
I don't remember what happened. There was Grotowski he was a mayor of this town at one time. He's dead now. But he was there. He had Associate Attraction was the name of his company. And what they would do is they'd buy these small cars like a Volkswagen or something, and they'd build a rack around it, and they'd make floats for parades.
Huh.
And he did some of that in there. And what else they had there? A flag company. Grotowski owned that. And then he left that. Somebody else bought in, and that's when the fire happened, I think.
I don't
think
know.
that was what happened.
They had a lot of
there
material.
was a company come in called Vandominiums. They redid the vans.
Yeah.
And a guy worked for me, Tommy Doyle. He was working for Vandominiums as a body man and a painter. And he come down and he said, Dave, I can't work with these guys. You got a job? And I said, yeah, come on down.
You get tired of putting in shag carpet, or?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So.
Didn't he paint the...
Disco lights, dice on the
Didn't he paint
mirrors.
that
Yeah.
big cow?
Yeah.
Oh,
For the...
By the creamery?
the creamery. Really?
No.
They brought it in from Chicago.
No, that's not that cow.
Not that cow, but a big one like
That was for Tino Lettieri. He had a grocery store up there in Chicago.
Okay.
And he had this big overgrown cow that would probably stand as high as your roof here. And Tommy got a ladder and he worked up there. There was a hole in the head of it. And he patched it up, and then they painted it, and they took it back to Chicago and put it up in front of that grocery store again.
Wow.
He died, Tino, but his wife still lives here in town. He had a couple girls, and I don't know where they're at. But,
And then there are a couple. I saw, Charlene, that you were the village secretary for about 9 years. Is that right?
Right, but I was also the village clerk for when Mr. Sorensen passed away.
Was that after you were secretary?
I was secretary from about 63 to 71.
Okay.
And I don't remember exactly when. I think Mr. Sorensen passed away after that. Mrs. Sorensen basically was the village clerk at their house. Mr. Sorensen had another job, and she did all of the paperwork. And she needed the job as village clerk because she would then get paid. And they had to appoint a village clerk until they could have an election for her to run to be the village clerk. So they appointed me as the interim village clerk to fill in the position until they could set up the next election. And then Rita ran for the election and she won, and she was village clerk for many years after that. Village clerk, the actual clerk.
Wow.
But she ran it from her home for many years.
You were also the secretary.
I was the secretary, yes. Right. I took the minutes for the village board, for the plan commission, for the park board, for the zoning board.
I found a picture, an article.
Don't say it.
See if you remember
Don't
this.
say it.
It might.
While he's looking for the picture, where was the village hall at? Was it in the same spot
It
or
was on Front Street.
on Front
That
Street?
little building
A
on
little-
Front Street.
It's a little concrete building,
right.
brick building there.
There's a test for Mr. Bergman. You tell who
That's
that young
my
lady
wife.
is?
Yeah, there she is.
And
Now, you'd have went to a dance with her, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. So this is from Thursday, January 26, 1961. And it says, Mr. and Mrs. Alvin C. Sipple, Sr. of 71st Street and 88th Avenue in Tinley Park, announced the engagement of their daughter, Charlene, to David Bergman, son of the late Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Bergman of Mokena. A fall wedding is planned by the couple. And Mrs. Sipple is employed as a secretary at the Continental Casualty Company of Chicago, and Mr. Bergman is employed at Cooper Hostert Garage in Mokena.
Right. Long time ago.
So you happy with your decision?
Well, we're still sticking around.
Kind of late now.
That's right.
You don't change horses in the middle of the stream.
That's true. I found another one I thought was pretty neat. Dave, of you here with the, I think it was the,
Yeah, that's
Out of
say the a steak fry in the Mokena Community
Yonker?
Park was enjoyed by the New Lenox Methodist Men's Club. Yeah, and it looks like you're here with Dave Bergman, Mike Herman, and John Peterson. That's who's.
I remember Mike Herman.
Oh yeah, I remember him, but I can't tell you what he was. John Peterson,
Oh.
that guy.
Yeah. I think we have one of those at home somewhere.
I thought something else. You got it there underneath that book, Mom.
Oh.
Now, I got this given to me by Mrs. Rauch, who was her husband owned the Mokena Oil Company.
And he was
Phillips
also a
Phillips
policeman.
66 product.
Okay.
They're down here on the other side of the tracks at Schoolhouse Road. Now, she claims that this was one of the
Can
first.
you hold on 1 second? Don't open that yet, okay? I gotta get my camera.
He wants a picture
I
of
want
the
a
flag.
picture, yeah. Okay.
Can we turn it
Well,
on the porch light?
I'm going to have to stand up to get it open.
Want me to help you out?
No. Now, I was told through her that this was the original flag of Mokena, but I don't have any proof of that.
Turn it upside down here.
I think,
Yeah, we're upside down.
yeah. There you go. There you go.
I have no proof that that happened.
Wow.
Now, I also seen a picture close to that the Civic Association had, but I don't know what year they had that, and I don't know what year this came in.
And how did you come about this?
Mrs. Rauch,
Ah.
they moved from Mokena, they moved down to Louisiana, and she come up to visit,
Look that up.
and her daughters stopped by for,
How old is this flag right now?
I have no idea.
I don't know that there's any marking.
Star Spangled Banner. I'm just kidding.
But I can't prove what I'm telling you.
Well, they always said
I can only go by hearsay.
we always had the Indian head.
Now,
So
Neil Tuttle originated the Indian head in the later days of Mokena. They used it as a symbol of Mokena. He made that up at Lincoln Way High School. But why she told me that, I haven't any idea, other than the fact I go by what she tells me. Her husband was here for years, and the family was here for a long time.
I think
But
you got to make it a bend here.
It folds in half. It folds again. Fold that, Mom.
Tell them about the time that you had with Harold Fitch when he was the chief.
I had a couple of doings with the police chief, Fitch. One of them
This could be edited out.
was
but go ahead.
he was down here on Wolf Road, this side of Route 30. As you come off of Wolf Road, or off of 30, you come down a hill and then you go up. And it was a winter day, and it was nasty, and it was cold. And this woman says, I went off in a ditch right by Route 30. She says, can you get your truck out there? I'm worried somebody's going to hit it. Well, I was busy as heck. And I said, you're just going to have to wait. I can't do everything. So she really was getting upset. And I said, okay, let's go. I put her in the truck, and away we went. We got out there, and there's the flashing lights, and there's a squad car right in the middle of the road. So I get out, and I said, what's going on? I said, this lady owns this car, I guess, and I'm here to get it out of here. He said, oh, yeah, that'd be a good idea. I said, well, you're going to have to move your squad car because it's in the way. Oh, well, yeah, you'll have to wait a few minutes. Well, here come a kid off of 30. He got on Wolf Road, and he was doing like 45 miles an hour. He seen that squad car, and he hit the brakes, and he slid and slid and slid. He couldn't stop that car, and he rammed that squad car right in the back. He run the trunk all the way up to the driver's seat.
Oh no!
And Fitch is in the middle of the road. He's jumping up and down. Stop! 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 I said, I told you to move the car. What the hell's the matter with you?
How do you like that? Was he happy you told him that?
Oh, yeah. Then
You had to know him.
then one day, I fixed their car. I put one of the squads come in. I put new brakes in it. Disc brakes was just coming into the thing. And he come back and he says, I just had brakes put in that one squad car. He said, it's making a noise. And I said, well, bring it in. Well, I don't know what's the matter. I'll pull the wheel and see. The shoe was wore off. And I said, I don't, he wore the brakes out. It's only been a month or so. Oh, he said, you just used a bad part. I said, okay. I put new brakes in it. I happened to go down the road here on Front Street, and I seen this guy. He's driving, and the brake light's on all the way down the street. So I went and I got Fitch. I said, you come with me. I want to show you something. What you going to show me? I got behind this car. I said, watch. He never takes his foot off the brake. That's why he ain't got no brakes on that car.
Right.
I said, they can't handle that. You can't be driving and your foot on
This
the
was
brake.
a police officer.
Sure, yeah.
I can't tell you.
Oh, please.
No,
Yeah, come on.
Tell him about the other one that lost his
Yeah, gun.
gun.
Oh, no.
What is this? Where's this stuff going?
Just on the internet.
No, we're done. We're done.
Oh, no.
After hours at
The
Mokena
interview's
front
over.
porch.
He's walking away.
We're done.
Why? Maybe just tell why did you guys choose to spend your lifetime here and your family? What was it about?
I liked it.
Mokena?
My wife wanted to go back out farming, but I didn't know a whole lot about farming. I had farmed some in the I pitched oats in the field, and I drove a tractor and stuff like that, but it really wasn't my cup of tea,
But you made it work in town?
It was a good place to raise a family.
yeah, we had a lot of
I mean,
fun.
we lived on Front Street. We had 3 daughters, and they could walk to school because they only had to go to Willowcrest. Of course, there was a crossing guard, which was fine, but they would come to First Street and pick up another bunch of kids. Then they would come over to the next street. And once they were out of my sight, they were within the sight of another mother. And she'd watch them until they got to the next house where they picked up some more kids, and our kids had a rule. They couldn't go past 3rd Street. You better not ever be found beyond 3rd Street. And everybody in town knew them. I mean, everybody knew our kids. And if they get in trouble here, they get in trouble at home again. And it was just a regulated living type of environment. There was the fire siren went off at 9 o'clock, and you can look on Facebook today and see all of these kids who are in their 60s. What do you remember about Mokena? The fire siren going off at 9 o'clock, and I better be home.
Bolted home, right? You start
got
running.
it. Get out of our way. And it was just where the police station is now. Used to be the fire station. When our kids were little, they closed Front Street from Division down to Schoolhouse. The kids would all come in their costumes, and they would parade. They had pulled out all of the fire trucks. Kids paraded in 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, and they all got a prize, and it was just the biggest event for the kids ever.
And who was doing that? Who was putting that on?
The fire department did.
Wives,
Yeah, the wives. One of the other big events in town.
women's auxiliary, they called it.
Yeah.
And we used to have a water ball team, and we played water ball. They put a beer keg on a wire and 2 posts, and you try to shoot it over their head. And Del Junker was pretty good at it, and we finally beat Manhattan. We had Bob Borden over there, but nobody could beat him. And we finally got him beat.
Water ball, huh?
Water ball. They took a hose and a pumper, and they get pressure build up, and then they would aim at that barrel or keg of beer. Wasn't any beer in it, was just empty. And then you try to shoot it down to that end. And
That was
they
every-
start out in the middle, and then you work back and forth.
That was every Sunday in the summertime for the fire department wives
You
and the
wore your
children.
bunker coat and your boots and your helmet. It was already like just at a fire.
Wow.
And we got some pictures of that. I don't know where they're at, but
Another big doings for the fire department, the auxiliary always had a spring luncheon for the town. They'd pull all the trucks out of the fire station, move them elsewhere, and all of the wives would make all of these dishes and bring them in, and we fed I don't know how many people, table after table after table. You didn't go to any restaurant and eat that day. You came up to the fire station. It was just an event in town. It was just Mokena.
Yeah.
that was a
Just one closing note. Only been in Mokena for 14 years, but I guarantee you when the whistle stopped many years ago, you were like in heaven because you live right on the railroad tracks,
None of
correct?
them houses weren't on there. That house wasn't there. That house was Hall's. This one was Jake Barron's. And then Oliver Schaefer was in the next one.
So do you miss the whistle
Bobby
at like
Kreml.
midnight?
See, it really came over us and hit more on First Street, you know. People would come up when we were at the garage and say, "What time is the next train going by?" I don't know. You better go there and get a schedule. I don't know.
I hardly notice it after a while, right?
You don't.
Yeah.
When we were kids, we'd get recess. The trains were steam engines at that time.
Wow.
And when them steam engines come through town, they were chugging. They would blow black smoke and it would go all the way over to the playground. You could feel the hot cinders in your hair.
Wow.
And the smoke.
Wow. Can you talk a little bit about, so how long is it's been about 5-6 years now since you sold
2017.
2017. So what was that process? How was that for you? Was that a hard process for you? Was it?
Not really. I was there for 40-some years, 42 years. I was getting old. I was in my 60s. Time to quit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, go ahead.
I haven't missed it. I mean, I miss the people, but I haven't missed getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and hustling and trying to get out by 7:30 to be up there by 8 o'clock, and who knows when you get out at the end of the day, because 5 o'clock was quitting time, but if somebody's car was there.
Sure.
There's plenty of times I worked at midnight or later, putting an engine in a car or finishing up something.
And then, watching the process after you sold it to tribes and that, what did you think? What did you think about what they did? How was it seeing?
Well, I was surprised at a lot of the stuff that he did. And then other things that he did was fine, I can understand he blocked in all the windows. I had like 3 windows or 4 windows down the side of the building on each side. He blocked them all in. He didn't have anybody. But I suppose he didn't want somebody breaking in there. And then the front windows, I had one that had a crack in it, but the rest of it was pretty good. But he took them out, and then he put windows in there that could open and close in the front. That was a big move. Then he put a new door on the front, new doors on the back, concreted the driveway coming in. Village was just dying to have me put blacktop in there.
Wait.
I never did.
I don't have any feeling about, just not seeing the people. But as for not being in business anymore, we went back there a couple times. It wasn't the same. We have a daughter who is Barb has never gone back in the building. She says, I can't go back in the building. It's not what we had. Her kids were raised there. Her 4 girls were raised there, and our other daughters, 2 daughters were there. We babysat them all. We had a room, and they had their toys in it, and you get in the back room and play, and shut up and let me alone, or come on out here and help me, and they all helped. They all did. They all remember it as a
I had a pig roast
place to
down there
play
for
and
people.
have fun.
I did a lot of things.
I miss all the spinning wheels because every time you drove down the street, when you came up to the shop, Barb had every flag, every kind of spinning wheel,
Right.
all kinds of cool stuff.
Yes.
That was like a staple.
And she still has all that. But and there were days we had a slow day here and a slow day there, and the guys were standing around, and the girls came out. They were, we were playing soccer in the back, kicking the soccer ball back and forth. The mechanics were kicking the soccer ball back and forth. Hey. It can't all be work. It's got to be a little fun here and there.
Sure.
And the girls remember that to this day. We were up at the garage all the time, and we talked to, we helped this customer and we helped that, and it's memories for them too.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you both coming and talking with me tonight, and coming and sitting on our porch talking a little bit. My grandfather was a mechanic in Wisconsin in a small town and had a U-Haul dealership with it. So I see the old pictures of my grandpa was Burlington, Wisconsin for 45 years. Had a shop that's still there. My uncle runs.
Right.
So that is those play an important part in small towns, and I really appreciate you guys sharing some of your story with us.
I don't think there are any old timers left in business that I can think of. The bank has changed hands.
Yeah.
Grocery
A lot of them are
stores.
dead. lot of
Yes,
people
that's
died
true,
in-
but their families are even
They
gone.
were involved with.
They're not here. They've
Dell
moved on.
Yunker from the fire department, and I think Fitch is in Texas, but he might be dead by now. And Tino Lettieri, he had the liquor store, he's dead.
Yeah, it's
But he wasn't an old timer here, but he made a mark,
yeah.
no doubt about it.
Well, as have you, and I'm glad we get to share a little bit of that story with our podcast, and we'd love to be able to sit down again sometime, talk to you guys.
I'm out of stories.
You're out of stories? We got them all?
No,
I highly doubt that.
There's-
I highly doubt
there's
that.
some older guys around yet that have stories.
Well, thank you guys very much for talking with
Okay.
me. I appreciate it, and
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
Thanks for taking up our time.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with the Bergmans. I really enjoyed sitting down with them, and I'm glad we got to share that conversation here. If you're enjoying the podcast, it would really help us out if you would share on Facebook our posts and our messages about the new episodes. Also, if you're able to go on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and leave us a review, that would be really helpful as well. You can send us an email at mokenasfrontporch@gmail.com with any show ideas or questions or any comments you want to share with us. We've been getting a few emails lately, and those have been really good and actually are going to be leading to some shows coming up soon. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Mokena's Front Porch.